be pretty short just because we're kind of going over some of the stuff that y'all have already been doing, which is, of course, prototyping. And you guys have some experience with that through the sketches that we've done. Also, um, with the wireframes and stuff yesterday, I know a lot of you actually created prototypes for it, which is really awesome. Like I've been hearing about some of the prototypes, so it's been pretty cool. um, any questions though before we get started with like wireframing or just prototypes in general before we actually dive into the prototype lecture? All right, well, since there's no questions, all right, we'll jump right into it. So basically, you all know what prototypes are. You've seen them, you've done them. But essentially, prototypes can be seen as like hypotheses, right? So we create solutions with wireframes to show stakeholders and to test with users. And prototypes themselves, as you've seen, can be done by hand. So with our sketches, um, I think we had an example of that last week during the sketches where we actually used the paper and then like, you know, a user would tap somewhere on the paper and it would bring up the next sheet of paper that follows. So prototypes can be done that way, or they can be more realistic and done digitally. So one reason that we do prototypes is because a lot of times coding can be very expensive and very time consuming. So a lot of the designs that you have, just to kind of get a quick iteration out there and to be able to show stakeholders, it's easier for a designer to come up with a prototype than to take those designs and hand them over to a developer for them to code out different like transitions and different animations and whatnot. Also, it would be much more work if a developer coded out different transitions and then you show it to stakeholders and they are like, nope, this isn't what we want. We want it, you know, something else. And then the designer has to go redesign and then the developer would have to recode all of that. So it just takes, it's very time consuming when you rely strictly on code. So a lot of times it's really good to prototype your designs first and then kind of get stakeholder buy-in, get feedback from your developers as well. And then once everything's kind of finalized, developers also have kind of a starting point, something to look at so that they know exactly what they're coding. So with prototypes, you will typically see two styles, which is like a high fidelity prototype and a low fidelity prototype. So most of the prototypes that you guys have created so far are considered low fidelity. And there are benefits to both. So like high fidelity references like the realistic look and feel of an app or a website. And so like the visual elements are there, the interactivity is there, like all of the UI components are there, and like everything kind of has like a working feel to it. Like it feels like you're on an actual website or it feels like you're using a real app. And so high fidelity prototypes provide features that are important to the overall user experience. They're very time consuming though, compared to a low fidelity prototype. Like it takes a lot of time to actually create a realistic look and feel to prototypes for high fidelity prototyping. But you'll often get realistic feedback from your users because everything feels real to them. It's almost as if they wouldn't be able to tell the difference between it being a prototype and this being like an actual product. Low fidelity prototypes are much quicker to create and changes can be made to them very quickly. So if you need to make changes and stuff, like typically do them with the low fidelity prototype, which is what you guys have been creating already. It takes a lot more time to create changes within a high fidelity prototype just because there's so much that goes into it. And also with low fidelity prototypes, you do have to remember that oftentimes they feel like an incomplete design. So when you're showing them when you're testing them with users, they'll typically be more candid with their feedback. They feel less compelled to be successful when testing low fidelity prototypes, just because it doesn't feel as real. As designers, we feel less attached to our low fidelity prototypes as well. So since they take a short amount of time to produce and it takes a shorter amount of time to actually edit them. So when you receive feedback, like you'll typically just throw away your low fidelity prototypes and like start over and stuff like that, just because they're so quick and you can reiterate on them super quickly. So you don't really have like an attachment to low fidelity prototypes as you would a high fidelity prototype. With high fidelity prototypes, you are typically probably not gonna just throw them away, especially after changes that need to be made. Like you're gonna feel pretty attached to it because they take so long to create, and you're gonna just want to reiterate on that design itself. But stakeholders recognize that oftentimes stakeholders will recognize that a low fidelity prototype isn't like the final design. And so they tend to expect more like changes and updates. When we present high fidelity designs and prototypes, it's more likely that stakeholders will push to make that actually go live. So that's also something to keep in mind, which is another good thing about high fidelity prototypes. Like once you kind of create your low fidelity ones and you figured out the different transitions you want to make, the flow of everything, and it feels right, then you'll put them into a high fidelity prototype to make it feel more real. And then once your stakeholders feel like, yes, this is exactly what we want to go with, then they'll want to go live. So like you'll pretty much take your high fidelity prototypes live with your developers and whatnot. So they'll start to code them out. And that's pretty much it on prototyping. That's kind of the dirty on prototyping and using our wireframes to create prototypes. Any questions about prototyping before we get into kind of how you can prototype using Figma?
Yeah. When it comes to prototyping your wireframes, how in depth do you need to go? Do you need to make every icon clickable? Do you need to make every return button functional, etc.?
It really depends on like what stage you're at. So like if you're still kind of iterating on the design, then you'll typically do like a low fidelity version of that. So like you'll only work on like what like one specific thing, one specific feature. But once you've kind of got an idea that, okay, I want these buttons on here, I want them to move here, like these have all been finalized, then you'll start to put them together in a high fidelity prototype, which will typically include like every one of those states like being clickable, right? So that's pretty much your difference between high fidelity and low fidelity. Like high fidelity, it's going to feel real. So like all the buttons will typically go to, you know, where they need to go, and then they'll go back and stuff like that. So they're going to be much more in depth, and you'll have, you know, the lines that are created during prototypes, you'll have a ton of those little blue lines. You'll see them everywhere.
Thank you.
And you can even create like high fidelity prototypes without making everything clickable. So I've done this with some of my designs before. Like if we're just adding a new feature to an already existing app, I'll take the real screen of the app and just make that one new feature button clickable. Everything else will just be static. But it still looks and feels real for that one feature at least. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, then I will share my screen and we will prototype what we did yesterday. So we're back in Figma. And so Figma recently, they actually didn't have prototyping maybe about 2 months ago. So you guys are kind of lucky that it was just implemented into their product. So now you have the design side, which is right here. So if you look in your top right of Figma, you have design, then you have the option to prototype, and then you have the option to like view the code or the styling of everything. So it's really cool because like when you're on a team, as a team of designers, product managers, and like developers and whatnot, Figma kind of helps out everyone. So the designer is able to come in here and design and prototype. Product managers are able to come in and like leave comments and stuff like that. And then developers are able to come into the same thing and look at the code so that they know where to start. So we'll go ahead and prototype out our Flutter app here. And so what we'll do is, so one of the things that we said we were going to do is have this profile icon. Well, actually, let me go into prototype first. This profile icon will bring up our menu page. And so what you'll want to do is select a trigger. So the trigger stands for like what makes this action happen. So for this one, it will be a tap. So we'll say on tap, the action will then be we'll go to the menu page and the transition. So we have different transitions here. You can do an instant transition, dissolve, move in, move out, push, slide in, slide out. And a lot of these you can, that's like the cool thing about prototyping. You can just play around with a lot of these different things and figure out what feels right. So for most of this, we can have like a little push, or we can do instant, or maybe even like a slide in, like the menu will slide in. And so when you select one of those, you can select like which direction you want it to go. And it also gives you like a preview down here, which is really cool. So a lot of apps don't actually give you a preview. And then you can choose the easing, which is kind of just, easing just is the motion of it. For this one, let's just say instant for right now. Well, no, let's go push. We'll have it push in towards the right. And so that's our menu now. And then let's say the user clicks on the background overlay here to go back. So we'll say on tap, their action will go back. Let's make sure that works. So I'm gonna go play. So we start here, click there, and we're able to go back. So awesome. So let's go back to our editor. And so now we want our group. So once we select on a group, we want it to actually go to that chat page for that group. So we'll select this group here, and we'll do another tap action, and the action will take us to the group message page. This one, let's do a slide in, and it'll slide from the right going left. And then from this page, we want our users to actually be able to to begin chatting. So once they tap into the chat box, let's do another trigger of tapping, and it will go to the keyboard, and this transition will just be instant. So now if we go back to our home page, and actually, let's go ahead and make sure that we can give this a little more in depth. So let's make sure that if we click on the back button, we'll go back to our home page. And so that transition will slide out, I believe, that way. So now we can test this to make sure this works. I think that I'm trying to remember how, thought there was a way you can, oh, well, yeah, you can do it on the other page. So let me go back one more. So you can also change like your prototype settings. So you can change which device you want to prototype on. And you can also change like the model. So you can go silver, space gray for the iPhone 10. You can change your background color to, you know, whatever color you want it to. And then you can also choose where to start. So now let's go to play. So now when a user's here, they can click on the menu button to bring up the menu. They can click out to go back to the home page. Once they click on the group, it brings up the group chat. Now we brought up our keyboard here. So boom, boom, boom. They can type in their message. They can send their message. And when they're done, they can go back to the home page. And we could even go a little more in depth to have like, if they click, so if they had their keyboard up here and they click anywhere out here, we get to miss the keyboard and stuff like that. Yeah, this is just a very low fidelity prototype, just going through the flow itself. And so if you were presenting this to stakeholders, you would just kind of let them know that this is the flow that you're thinking about for your users. And then, you know, you'll get their feedback. And if everything is approved and whatnot, then you'll start to make this more high fidelity, and you'll do the designs more high fidelity. So you actually put in the colors, actual icons, and images. Might even put in some real dummy text here. So you'll give group names and some kind of dummy message. And then you'll prototype that out again to make sure that everything is reaffirmed that this is exactly how you want the live app to look and function. So any questions about prototyping here in Figma?
When you're designing, do you have to like make every button clickable? I know Serena asked something similar earlier, but this is for low fidelity. You don't have to, but once you have it like really advanced and ready to roll, do you need to tell the developer, do you need to show them that every button is clickable, or you could just leave it?
It just depends. A lot of times you can, especially if you give them a fully worked out high fidelity prototype. Typically they will assume that every button's clickable, but of course, as the designer, they want to know what's the intent for each button. And so you can either show them that in a prototype, or you can just kind of write it out in comments or annotate it in the wireframes.
Great. Thank you. I was just thinking way ahead, but.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, it's really good to think ahead, because you'll think these out as you're designing, you know, and there are different ways you can iterate this to your developer. Just figuring out which works best for your developer and your team is usually going to be the best option.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So with this type of prototype that I just showed, and what Figma allows is called like screen to screen transitions. And so it feels a little less real than like an actual app, because a lot of times, so going back to the presentation part of it, a lot of times, like when you click on a menu button, it doesn't, the page doesn't push out like that. Typically just um, your menu bar here will slide itself, but the page stays static. For now, I don't believe you're able to show that in Figma prototypes, but there are other prototypes where they allow for the on-screen transitions like that, to where everything else stays static and you can bring in moving parts and stuff.
Hey, Brandon,
Yes.
you can actually do some of those things with Figma with overlays.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Right. So yeah, there are like these overlay behaviors that you can start to play around with as well. That I believe, I'm not sure if they work similar to some of the ways that it's done in InVision Studio and XD. I'll have to test it out to see, but I know a lot of times when you're doing certain overlays, if you want the background to remain the same as like where you started, the layers need to be grouped the same. And so the layers that you have here also need to be on this page, like in the same order in your layers palette over here. I know that's the case for InVision Studio and XD, and I'm assuming it would be the same for Figma here. I haven't had enough time to really play around with it in Figma. But for right now, you can just worry about doing just the screen-to-screen transitions. And also, I mean, you can play around with the overflow behavior. I mean, that's what prototyping is about. It's really about playing around with what feels right. And since we have a good bit of time left today, I'm actually going to show you guys just some of the like popular prototyping tools. Just going through, because I know you've heard me like say like all these different names, and maybe you've never really heard of some of them or seen some of them. So just wanted to just show you guys like a few of them. And you can write these down and maybe go play around with them when you have some free time. Because prototyping tools they're just like design tools. It's pretty much a preference thing. Like each one of them has their own way of doing certain things, and each designer figures out which one feels more comfortable for them. So you guys, of course, have seen Sketch and you've seen Figma, and I'm pretty sure you've seen Adobe XD. But Adobe XD, of course, is another one that you can use, which is an all-inclusive tool similar to Figma. So you can design and then also prototype inside XD. But with XD's prototyping, they do allow more micro interactions. And so you can do more things on a static screen. So you can do button toggles. You can have menus come up within one screen without having to go to separate screens. So Adobe XD does allow for that. Other ones I know you guys have seen InVision, because we've been using InVision, so I won't really go into that one. That's all from InVision app, but there's also InVision Studio, which is a pretty powerful prototyping tool. It's become very popular over the last like year or two. And again, you can do like a lot of different micro interactions inside of that. So not necessarily just going from screen to screen, but you can also, you have more control over things in InVision Studio. So you can change like the timing of certain elements coming in. Like there's a lot that you can do. Like it's pretty in-depth, like motion design. It's also a design tool as well, and it's completely free. It is still a little bit buggy with the design tool, so I will point that out. But other than that, it's a really cool tool, and you can also import from Sketch into InVision Studio. So that's pretty cool. So like if you did all your designs in Sketch, you can pretty much open up that same thing inside of InVision Studio. Another one that's really good, if I can spell, is Principle. I definitely spelled that wrong. But anyway, Principle is another design tool that also, or is another prototyping tool that allows for Figma and Sketch designs to be uploaded into its tool, and you can also prototype that. And it's pretty in depth. You can do a lot of different micro interactions as well, or you can do screen to screen transactions. So as you see here, like you can do animations like this, where you click on a button and other little buttons pop out and they kind of move and twist and all. So you can really get in depth with a lot of motion animation with Principle. Now, one that I haven't really used is ProtoPie, but I know that it's kind of started to make a name for itself. There is a bit of a learning curve with ProtoPie. Well, there's a learning curve with like each one of these prototyping tools, which is why, you know, I say whenever you have like free time, go in and just kind of explore them, see if any of these work for you. Because as a designer, like being able to use any one of these tools will be pretty much like an asset for you. And a lot of places don't really have preferences for what tool you use. Usually it's just going to be, you know, whatever you're comfortable in. But being able to show that you're knowledgeable in some of these tools is it's pretty good. But ProtoPie is really in depth with a lot of its motion as well. There is, like I said, there is a bit of a learning curve. I haven't really dove into ProtoPie much. I think I started to when it first came out, and it was super confusing at that time. And so I left it alone. And that was like 3 years ago, and I never touched it again. But I think they've listened to their users, and I think they made it a lot easier than when I first started using it. But it is pretty in depth. But it does support Sketch and Figma designs as well. And the last one I want to show you guys is Framer X, which is another one that's like a design tool that you can also use to prototype with. Framer X has probably the biggest learning curve of all, because you can do like simple screen to screen transitions, like right here that you're seeing, that like the screens just kind of slide in and whatnot. But if you want to go more in depth with some of the animations and stuff, with Framer, you'll have to go into like the back end and actually code it out. So there's a lot of coding involved with Framer X. So I definitely don't recommend this just starting out. I'd say go get familiar with some of the other tools that are out there. And then once you have the time and once you feel like you're ready, kind of dive into Framer X. So you do have to have an understanding of like JavaScript and React coding languages. But Framer is still a really cool tool. It's pretty cool to design in too, because you can use actual data. I remember someone asked me this question about a week or two ago, like prototypes, like instead of just clicking and like if you clicked into an input field and it just generates random text for you, can you make it more realistic? Well, Framer kind of does that. Framer allows you to click into certain input fields and actually type in the data and then like hit you know, the go button or submit or whatever else that you're trying to do. So yeah, these are just a few tools that I would say whenever you just get a chance, just go explore them, check them out. A lot of them are not free to use. I believe, well, most of them will give you some kind of free trial, but a lot of them aren't free. I think Principal costs, Framer costs. I'm not sure about ProtoPie, but I'm sure it probably does cost. Adobe XD is free. Figma's free. Sketch costs. And yeah, I believe that's it. But I'm also gonna drop this image that Gabe found into the Slack channel, and it just kind of shows. It just gives like a little chart of like easiest to most difficult for these different tools to use. Just to give a reference for just how some of them are a little more difficult to use, but some are easier to use and have less of a learning curve and whatnot. So any questions about this? I didn't want to overwhelm you guys with a bunch of different tools, but you know, I just wanted to put their names out there. And when you guys get a chance, just kind of go explore them and just see what they're about. They're fun to play around with. No questions about any of these tools or prototyping?
I actually have a quick one, kind of a technical question about the prototyping in Figma. Mm-hmm. Do you happen to know how to make it so, like, if there's like a status bar at the bottom, so it stays at the bottom instead of, so like when you scroll, you can always see it?
Yeah, so if you click on, if you go back into design, you see, and you click onto one of the rectangles, any of your shapes. Right there, you see constraints, fixed position when scrolling.
Got it.
Yeah.
Genius. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say most design tools will have a way to where you can pin those items. So if you don't want them moving, like if they need to remain static and things need to either scroll underneath or above and stuff like that, you can either, like Figma calls it fixed position, so it stays. I think Adobe XD may call it pin, and InVision Studio calls it pin. So you just kind of pin it there and it doesn't move.
Got it. Cool. Thank you.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I want you guys to pull up the wireframes that you were working on yesterday, and just kind of prototype those out using Figma. I know some of you may have done it yesterday in class with the Anchor app, but yeah, just take some time to prototype some of those wireframes. And if you only have like one screen, maybe create another screen or two to show like one flow, and just prototype that out. Yeah, I just want you guys to kind of play around with the prototyping tool here in Figma. So I'll give you guys 15 minutes just to work on that, just in case you actually do need to add more screens. And then, yeah, just play around with the prototyping tool, play around with some of the transitions, and see what works to create a user flow.
And this was for Anchor?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, back to our movie app.
I accidentally deleted my board.
Birthday behavior. Um,
Yeah. I can probably just make another one. That shouldn't
yeah,
take
just
that long. Yeah.
yeah.
You
That's
could you could maybe also find it in your deleted. There's a there's a place where all the deleted files go, and maybe you could retrieve it. I've done that
Okay.
before.
Do you know where I can find that? The deleted section?
In Figma, yeah. So if you go back to your
Oh,
file,
deleted files.
yeah.
It says I don't have any.
Oh, well, that's terrible.
I didn't delete the actual file. I deleted the actual artboard into my
For that case, Ash just showed me something really cool yesterday that you can actually save a version history of it. So if you go to your actual file, and then when you click on the save, there is, Ash would probably tell you better, but if you go to file, and then there's like the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth option that says save to version history. So it just keeps all of your last actions so you could undo some of your work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like if it's basically like if you were to give this to the devs, right, and like full access, right? Let's say if you give them full access to it, like editable access, and they accidentally move something, right? Or somebody on your team, it doesn't even have to be the devs, right? Accidentally move something, you're like, crap, this was the master and it was done. And everything was pixel perfect, right?
Right.
So you go to save version history, and then that, like when you make the major save, like let's say you're like, this is done, right? Save a version history of it, but you can see, you can click show version history too, and it, watch, if you click it, go ahead, click that button. Off to the side, it'll tell you all the edits that or the things that have been done to it. So if there's someone else working on it, it'll say like this person did that. But if you want to go back to the like revert back because someone accidentally moved something, you would click the bolded thing that says current version, but it'll say like whatever you named the whatever the the save
So
version.
how do I get the past boards into the current boards? Since if I were to revert back to the last state with those boards, wouldn't it delete the current?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's what I'm
I
saying.
don't know.
That's fine. I'm gonna just create a new one. That's fine.
I would make it like a duplicate, and then you know what I mean. Make a duplicate, and then just do it on the duplicate. See if you can like go back to the other ones, and then pull them. Like you select them, copy, and then pull them into the new one and paste them in. That's what. That's how you could do it. Yeah. Try that.
I'm doing it now. How do I go back? How do I check version history again?
here.
File.
File.
And
I see it.
version history.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Which is one of the advantages of Figma over some of the other tools. I don't think that any of the other ones actually have like version history control.
Okay, got it. Thanks. Perfect.
Yeah, version history is huge for devs. They use it all the time with code in GitHub and whatnot.
Yeah, same. When I was coding a lot, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that is good to know. Thank you, guys.
About 4 more minutes. All right. Does anyone care to share their prototype?
Sure. Okay. All right. So we are in the home page, and you can take a look at what movie you want. You'll select your movie. If the times work out for you, you can select whichever time you want. and continue to review the date, time, quantity, and you can purchase your ticket and share it if you have multiple tickets purchased.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah.
I like that you kept everything low fidelity, like, didn't go like super in depth, but it still shows the main flow that you're trying to convey.
Yeah. Should it go beyond that, or I don't know?
I mean, not necessarily. If that's like I said, if that's the flow that you're trying to receive feedback on, then that would be fine.
Okay. Are there other steps you would have added? I was having a hard time thinking of other steps.
None that I could think of, just because, I mean, the way that I iterate would be different from how you iterate. So, like there's always, things that you can think of, but are they necessary? Maybe, maybe not. That's why it's good to kind of see your flow laid out. Like if you feel like it gets the main idea out there for users and all, then it's usually a good idea not to like overcomplicate it, like not to, go super crazy with it. Keep it simple for the users and whatnot. And then maybe later you can add it in as like a new feature and stuff. So. Anyone else?
I can go.
Okay.
On the wrong page. All right, so pretty simple. This was the page I created yesterday. It was my first time using Figma, so it was like figuring stuff out.
Nice.
But we can click on a movie, and then we have like the show times, and ideally you would like select a show time, but I haven't done that part. But we can go to purchase tickets, and then you have a screen where you can select the ticket quantity. So the idea is that like when you input the number here, then like the price of like that quantity will generate and show, and then like a total will appear here, and then you can like go to like payment method will be the next step. But for now I just linked it, so if you hit Anchor Cinema it will take you back to the front page.
Nice.
So yeah, simple.
Yeah, I like it.
Thanks.
Very good. Again, keeping it low fidelity. That's all we're trying to focus on right now. We're not trying to overcomplicate things, add in the beautiful designs and whatnot.
So hard.
I know it's tempting a lot of times because you want to not just use like gray shapes and, or you want to just start putting in real designs and all of that. But a lot of, like I said, it'll save you time and headache just to kind of do it this way first a lot of times, and then get feedback on that, and then kind of just grow the fidelity out.
You don't want to spend too much time on something just to hear that like people are like, no, we don't like the way this flows at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they might start commenting on the wrong things. Like they may not even focus on the flow. They'll start saying like, oh, I don't like this color and, all of that. And it's like, well, that's not even really the final color. I was just throwing something in. So then you start explaining other elements that have nothing to do with what you were trying to convey.
Yeah. Well, it would also be equally frustrating if you had just done the like black and white flow, because that's what it's about, and they were like, I don't like this color. Is it gonna be like black and white? And you're like, no.
unless you're Uber and you're like, yes, that's the only color we're going with. We'll throw a little green in there every now and then.
Yeah.
Thank you though for sharing. Anyone else care to share?
Ivan.
Yeah.
No pressure, Ivan. But we want you to show yours.
Yeah, we want you to see. We want to see yours again.
Honestly, I was doing research on the different tools. Or you want to see the one that I already have?
Yes, show it.
Okay, one second.
Are you still leaning more towards studio?
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of dope stuff you can do in studio, especially once you go into like the advanced timing of certain elements and whatnot. It's easily one of my favorite tools.
What tools do you use usually?
Say that again.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Let's have Ivan do his thing.
It's loading. 1 second.
Technology, right? That's usually the worst part of it. I was presenting a prototype one time and it crashed my entire app. And the people, some outside of the developers, some of the other stakeholders that were watching, like they thought it was my fault. They're like, "Oh, is this how the app's gonna behave?" Well,
so yeah, this is the one that I made.
Okay.
So you can both sign up and log in. They both work. I show that you click it. That way the keyboard pops up, and then of course you fill out the information.
Right.
Everything here, it's basically interactable. So this article takes you to the article 1, even the read more right here. If you want to share, then you click right there. And then share with Facebook right there. Or you can cancel it. Or actually share it. And then also in the home, you have the drag option. You can see it's a little bit slow. And you can see the dot in the bottom right here.
Right.
Since there's no picture, you can't see it. And then the settings, we have a couple. But you can switch out the current picture. So this will be your current picture. The save button doesn't work unless you actually select a picture.
Nice.
The notification, you can turn it off and on unlimited times. And oh, look at that. Beach ball. And actually for the profile information, since I kind of split it, it saves the notification setting.
Right.
So for example, if I go here, turn it off, I go to profile, and I go back, it's still off. If I turn it on, and again, now it's on. And yeah, and let's sign out. And if you want to log in, again, information, and you can either remember your password or not. And log in.
It's really good.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Like, you've been doing a lot of exploring in Vision. For this page, especially since it's just like a shape up top to show that it's moving, it'd probably be good to just number each block. Just like 1, 2, and then you just swipe through, and that way the stakeholder can tell that it's actually like swiping through outside of the dot indication. Yeah. Really cool.
Thank you.
Any more before into today's assignment and let you guys go. All right, well, if not, I will go ahead and share my screen once again to bring up the assignment for today. And some of you may have already pretty much done a good bit of the assignment with your stretch goals yesterday.
I like redoing them all the time anyway, so it's just good practice.
Right, yeah, of course. So your assignment today is you're going to create one cohesive prototype that encapsulates all 3 to 5 of the different user flows that you previously created for Newsy. So you're going to make sure to include the core screens and any other screens that you need to make a complete prototype. You're going to write a 500 to 700 word reflection statement that details your process of creating wireframes and a cohesive prototype at this stage in the process. And your stretch goal is to add transitions in InVision that complete the overall experience, or Figma, if you guys use Figma, adding different transitions. And so you're going to submit a link to your prototype and then also a link or a PDF of your reflection statement.
What are transitions again?
So transitions are like the different ways that you can go to the next state. So like, you know, push or slide or move or dissolve, instant. So the way that the action is performed.
Cool.
It's like a lot of times you can just make it instant, just to iterate through a prototype, but showing transitions makes it a little more realistic. So any questions about this? So you're going to do one actual cohesive prototype that shows like 3 to 5 different flows.
So one prototype should have like 5 different functionalities in it.
Right.
So just one. Okay.
Yeah.
So far I've been making like one prototype per task. So that's easier to follow, but you just want us to combine. Like if I made 3, you want me to combine all 3 of them into one.
Right. So yeah, so you're doing like the entire flows. So basically what you're going to include is like either a way to go back home, to go back to a starting point, or like a back button that goes back a page, and then like maybe you show a different flow. So you're showing 3 to 5 different flows all within one prototype.
Kind of like what Ivan did, right?
Right.
Yeah. All right.
So that's actually a great example. So Ivan showed a sign up process, which was one flow, a login process, which was another, a way for users to view movies, way for users to navigate to settings. And so, yeah, all of that was in one cohesive prototype.
Okay.
All right. The assignment is actually up in the training kit, I believe. I'll send a link to that as well, just so you guys make sure you have it. But other than that, that's all I have for you guys.
Thanks, Brandon.
As usual, I'm available. If you have any other questions about like prototyping or wireframing or anything else with these, some of the other tools I showed you, like if you're really interested in them, go to YouTube and look up like tutorials on them. Like that way you can really see them in action. You can see what's possible, and you can follow along with a lot of the tutorials and whatnot. Let me post today's assignment.
And I got some time available, so if anybody needs some help or tips, doesn't mind me you asking.
Oh, no, no, no. I do not appreciate you like trying to piecemeal out my tutorial time. No, nobody else.
All right, that's all I have. I may be doing QA tomorrow. Not 100% sure yet, but so you may see me again before the weekend comes. But if not, have a great weekend. I will see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Brandon.
Bye.
Take care.